Welcome everyone to our exclusive webinar on enabling new digital business models for equipment manufacturers. My name is Thomas Igu. I'm the head of content at Copperberg, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. I'm joined by a group of fantastic guests, and I'll get around with the introductions very shortly. But before I do so, a few general announcements. The recording of the webinar will be made available to all participants later this week. And if you have any questions for any or all of the panelists, please submit them at any time during the discussion via the Zoom control panel. You will see a Q&A button. And we will conclude the webinar with a Q&A session. If we don't have time to go through your specific question, we'll get back to you post-webinar with an email answer. Now, today we will discuss the commercial, operational, and practical advantages of using digital technologies to drive innovation and value creation for equipment manufacturers and their customers. So the discussion will cover several topics, including the increasing demands from end-user organizations for equipment manufacturers to provide new services that support their changing operational needs and digital strategies. We'll also look at how digital technologies allows equipment owners and operators to address skill shortages and improve operational performance and productivity of the equipment they rely on. We'll also look at some real-world examples of how equipment manufacturers are providing remote monitoring and on-demand subject matter expertise to support critical equipment using IoT and digital technology. And then we'll also look at opportunities for product research and development organizations to use real-world operational data to improve their offerings over time. So, I would like to introduce our guests. So joining me for the discussion, we have Carol Herta. So Carol is the global head of automation at Merck Healthcare and is responsible within his domain for 18 sites in biotech, pharma, and R&D. He holds a Master of Science in Automation and Control at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne. And Carol has been also a diploma in electrical engineering at Aachen University of Applied Sciences in Germany. So Carol has been working within Merck for almost 10 years. He was involved in several roles, but always within industrial automation. He is a strong supporter of IT and OT convergence and is driving several programs and initiatives within Merck toward digital plants enabling Industry 4.0. Next, we have Andreas Bille, who is the head of development mechatronics for automation project design. He started at Bosch and Strobel in 1988 with a vocational training as an industrial electronics engineer. Afterwards, he specialized in the development of PLC and SCADA programming. And in recent years, Andreas has supported worldwide project startups and qualification actions at customer sites. Currently, he's responsible for the hardware and software architecture and supports the digitalization of BNS machines. We also have Eivind Esayasen from MH Vert. Eivind has a bachelor's in mechatronics from Kristiansand, and he's been at MH Vert for about 8 years, working with digitalization from 2014, focusing on condition-based maintenance and performance service. He's now focused on data-driven service development. And then last but not least, we have Thilo Kaschubek, who is responsible for putting the EMEA business development strategies of OSIsoft into action. So in this capacity, he leads the team that is incubating the latest OSIsoft technologies from edge to cloud and the associated business models for customers and partners. So, gentlemen, welcome. So, first off, I would like to run a very quick poll with the audience, just so that we can get an understanding of where everyone is from. So if you could take just a few seconds to answer the poll that is now popping up on your screen. So looking to see if people are end user of data infrastructure or if they're more in the equipment manufacturing service provider side. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer the poll. And we will share all the results of the polls we conduct today later in the week with the recording of the webinar. So you can have access to the results. Okay, so let's get started. So how do we enable new digital business models for equipment manufacturers? And actually, maybe before we look at the how, let's look at the why. And Carol, thanks for joining us. That's why you're here today, to explain the why. So as a customer or end user of various equipment, what is driving your choice of partnerships going forward?
So certainly in the past it was more the mechanical equipment capabilities that was making the choice. So to deliver desired process output, the equipment reliability and maintainability. Long lifetime, 25 years old equipment, because the initial investment were big. But nowadays I see it's that we start focusing more and more on software aspects within the equipment, on data. And certainly automation system capabilities and flexibilities. Also on information availability from the production machines to drive production process improvements, to see product quality, to drive machine performance analysis. We still want to have the long-lasting mechanical equipment, but we want to have also the software flexibility and data availability. So that's what is changing. And this is really extremely important for us to be able to quickly adapt to the fast changing environment. Now, this is how it works today. And if you ask for the future, certainly more plug and produce type of equipment integration, seamless equipment integration to IT infrastructure, but also to manufacturing applications like data historian, like MES. So it comes together as a service from the equipment suppliers. It's like a car. You buy a car to drive it, and you don't want to do system engineering around that. So that's very similar what we would expect in the future also from the equipment suppliers. Also, if you say equipment apps, like an app store, if a certain use case, you download the use case from app stores and you start using it. For example, improving equipment efficiency from painting line. So you don't want to be developing these use cases, but you want to consume those use cases by developed to someone else. So those are the use cases where could lead, I would say, why impacting the system selections in the future. It's more embedded software data solution together with that equipment.
Is it changing drastically how you're actually purchasing from the equipment manufacturers? Because is it then less transactional based, or are you going more towards some kind of subscription linked to your service level agreements over long term with maybe more monthly fees, or how does that work then?
Yes, you're right. I mean, in the industry, I see the tendency to go for more equipment as a service. All right, that's what you're looking for. And if the industry is still not there, but the tendency is going there, which I think it's very beneficial. Yes, it's more into subscription, but then utilizing the equipment for a fee. And of course, we don't pay for equipment unavailability. It needs to be always there. You need to produce. You need to give a value for us. And that's why the data visibility, it's very important.
Yeah. So how is your relationship with equipment manufacturers changing or evolving? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities they need to address, right? Because if you're not just buying a car, right? You're buying the expertise, the data. It's kind of a complete package, I guess. So it's more of a partnership evolving towards that, or
Yes, yes, this is the wish we would like to go. I mean, we have certain suppliers where we are engaging in this. Certainly, we need to refocus the industry a little bit from mechanic centric to more soft and electronic data centric. Opportunities you mentioned, if you have an equipment with 25 years old software, there are no opportunities deriving from that. So we need to introduce software lifecycle that the equipment provides new features to us with new use cases, data-driven use cases. And let me show you one example I have here, could support the discussion. Can you see my screen?
yeah.
So let's imagine what is currently being done. We need to invest some time to set up our infrastructure. And this is the design of equipment connection to IT infrastructure. Also to design and configure the data interfaces. Now to define a batch context, asset context, that's what had to be still done by us, by the end users. We also need to do the categorization of data. Is it GXP relevant, not GXP relevant? Because there are some impacts due to that. We need to store some data longer than the others. We need to also qualify the interfaces because we are in a GMP environment. So this is the first stage we need to invest. Then once we have the data, we need to start thinking about use cases. So normally you start studying and say, what are the predictive maintenance measures? How do I change actually the equipment performance? Where do I need to twist the equipment? And this is also for equipment efficiency increasing measures. So once you know what you can do better, you create dashboards so that the user can start making the decisions really based on that data. So you see, until then, it's taken us quite some time to develop those use cases. And this can be up to 80% of actually the investment. So you spend quite a lot of time and money and effort in there. But actually what you need, what we want is actually this data-driven decisions. And you see, it is really the iceberg challenge. You spend 80% of the time to cleansing the data, to get the data, to qualify the data interfaces, just to get the data-driven decision. And the question I asked in the industry a couple of years ago, and here Andreas Bille was there, say, how can we make it, how can we change it? So why this cannot be supplied by the equipment manufacturers or service delivery, who have actually the best knowledge in that? So you see, you mentioned, yes, the service embedded in the equipment. That's what we're looking for. It's that the equipment comes not just with the mechanical piece, but also with all the software components enabling actually this data-driven decisions. So we would be able to buy that. I mean, we will be willing to buy those software packages if we could directly go to this candy, I would say, which is the data-driven decisions.
Carol, this is Thilo. Just a quick question. To what degree, and I mean, this looks like you build something from scratch, you call your equipment suppliers on the table, you discuss the data strategy associated to the equipment, that's fine. But how you deal with existing equipment, legacy assets, what are your strategies and thoughts to incorporate those into your data infrastructure?
This is a very interesting question and a very important question because we don't buy equipment every day, right? I mean, we talk about millionary investments. What we try to push with the industry is to enable software lifecycle. You see that the software lifecycle within industrial environment, production machines, it's as the production machine. The production machine is 20 years old, the software is 20 years old, and that's where no digitalization can work. In IT, you have the life cycle like 2-3 years, and then you exchange the software, you have new features and so on. So we need to enter the lifecycle management, software lifecycle management within the production environments. And this is not just for the digitalization purpose. It is also for purpose of cybersecurity. What does it mean, 20 years old equipment cybersecurity? I mean, this is contradicting. That's why we are investing more and more into the life cycle, reducing the life cycle certainly from 20 years, 10 years, potentially 7 years, so that the equipments are updated, upgraded with new software, so you can embed these new features like equipment connectivity, data historian, MES connectivity, because certainly connecting a DOS system to an MES, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Thank you.
And do you find any extra challenges, because I guess you're dealing with various equipment manufacturers, so you have various vendors that are now trying to provide various software. So when it comes from a more IT architecture, IT infrastructure, kind of the bottom of your pyramid, do you then get your own IT department? I mean, do you have a dedicated IT department just for that, or are they more involved in purchasing decisions of equipments because they need to maybe have their say in terms of compatibility of software and these kind of perspectives?
The roles and responsibilities between the engineering department and IT are quite clear on our side, and IT is supporting us on administration of that system, of data system, of PI, for example, but also MES. They are helping us in terms of data contextualization, data gathering, qualification of that system. But when it comes to equipment connectivity, is the engineering department. These are the guys which are on the shop floor, which is the automation. They have the process understanding, equipment understanding, and they are in responsibility, accountability for purchasing this equipment. Certainly, we work together with the IT department to define the user requirements whenever we buy an equipment, what we need to look for. And it's a joint effort. Still, the equipment stay with the responsibility of the engineering department.
Do you see that changing over time as software becomes more and more important?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. And we see is that we will get more and more support from the IT department, especially for systems which are standardized. An MES system, a data exchange system is standardized. We have the same system for all our facilities. And that's where IT plays a very important game, because they are standardizing, they're used to this environment of software. Now, the diversity which is at the shop floor still need to be managed locally. And that's why I don't see currently an IT department taking over these roles. There was certainly more interfaces that need to be managed. The IT department still stays as service provider to the OT, to the engineering environment, production environment.
Okay, well, the ultimate question, I guess, is how far are you from reaching the top of the pyramid?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, mainly we are focusing on equipment integration to get the data. So this takes us a lot of time and effort to get actually, that's what we want to do. And we have several use cases where we can bring the money back into the company from those use cases, data-driven decisions. But as you see, 80-20%, it's still too long actually to get there. We would need to get much quicker there to get the value out of those data quicker.
Yeah.
Carol, before we move on, just a little bit of exploration. I mean, we're talking about industrial operational data here. So a lot of data that are very close to the production facilities. We know that they are sometimes very sensitive in nature, and that especially the pharmaceutical industry, they're probably very cautious to share data out in public, third parties. To what degree you using already cloud strategies for, types of analytics, data storage, data sharing with other customers or partners of yours?
When it comes to data coming from production equipment, we are not there yet. Other applications we had in cloud services, more higher level systems, level 3, level 4 from the ISO 95. But from production equipment, we are still cautious. And this is confidentiality, certainly. But also the fear of sharing those data. I think that's it. So here we're having discussions with the equipment vendors, which data to share, which not. It is still, the industry is still immature in here to say it's black and white. Or we can share this, we can't share that. So yes, certainly. And there are different aspects. You mentioned GMP compliance. So we have data which we need for quality assurance. We need to store them for 11 years. Then we have also confidentiality information in terms of recipe parameters and so on. So there's multidimensionals that we need to take care before sharing that data.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Well, actually, one last question, because we live in a strange world. It is 2020, and there's been a pandemic running around for a long time now. Do you feel that this, and maybe you're able to say compare with different equipment manufacturers that you work with? Some have more advanced services than others, perhaps. But do you feel that this new type of relationship that you're establishing with your vendors has helped you better kind of cope with the pandemic when there were lockdowns, and perhaps you can have technicians on site and so forth?
So certainly this remote access to the production machine it's very important, and this helped in a lot of cases. But what the COVID and the pandemic taught us really is that we need to invest much more into remote services. And remote services are not only mean remote access to the production machines, but also sharing the data. As you mentioned here, Tino mentioned cloud services whatsoever, because based on that data, we can predict a lot of things. Also, the service technicians can do a lot of troubleshooting from their offices, so they don't have to travel to us. So that's why I see it's still a big potential to cover. Still, I need to say is that we will not get rid of the local technicians, because we still have a physical machine. You need to go from time to time to the physical machine and shake it. You need to do something there. But we can certainly minimize the effort of going to the sites.
Thank you, Carol. Actually, interestingly enough, we at Copperberg, we run a lot of surveys annually. So we ran a survey last year on kind of aftermarket services within OEMs. And one of the questions we had was, do you have a clear digital strategy? So that was in 2019. And we had about 32% of respondents claiming that yes, they did, and about 8% claiming no, they did not. And then we had kind of in between, partially or in development. And so we just ran the same survey this year in the late spring, early summer, so post-COVID. And the amount of people claiming to now have a clear digital strategies has dropped from 32% to 17%. And those claiming not to have a clear digital strategy has actually doubled, going from 8% to 16%. So quite interesting to see, when you're not confronted with a problem, your perception of how you think your company is doing, and then all of a sudden, everyone's working from home, you have to support customers remotely and, communicate with colleagues remotely, and then you kind of see the reality of the situation. Very interesting. And that brings me to you, actually, Andreas. Not that your reality is like that, but so for our next part, so now we've listened to Carol kind of share his view on the why of digital services. Well, tell us the how. How do you do it? And you know, you have a perfect picture frame because you're right behind your digital lab as well, so it works quite well. But so in an increasingly crowded market, how are you differentiating yourself as a business, and how do you work on retaining your competitive edge and maintaining customer satisfaction?
I think one important point is not just to deliver a mechanically good machine, as Carol said. Now there are some more points that we need to do, and this is more or less support the machine with data and be able to offer on database a better service for customers.
Yeah. So what role and impact do you see new data-driven service offering and business models having on your organization going forward?
I think it's a good point that Carol mentioned with his pyramid, because this is a direct influence to what we do. Maybe you can show our first slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a similar picture that Carol offered. So in the past, we were just providing a really good machine to our customers, and this machine was creating a smaller set of local information database, which is available to the operators directly on the machine, and there were no real improvements made out of this data. And as Carol said, more or less the customer had to build the structure around the machine to know which kind of data is really required to check a machine or verify a machine or optimize a machine or improve OEE. And more or less on our end, we need to prepare, or what we do now is we need to provide assets for the machine. This means we have to structure the machine and provide contextual data and data modeling on our end, and even start with analysis. So this is one of the first big steps we need to do. And this allows the customer and us as well to do really data-driven decisions. And the important thing is, as Carol mentioned, if we do something as a machine manufacturer, the customer is able to use these improvements from the first day the machine is delivered, because we have the knowledge of the machine. And for instance, if a customer wants to do the same things, he needs to receive the machine. He knows to learn how the machine really works and need to get some deep information out of the machine or learn the machine. And that's quite difficult for customers. We as the machine builder, we know the machine really well, and we can support with at least a basic set of assets to do contextual, let me say, data and viewing of a machine.
So do you work a lot with increasing communication with your customers? Because as you say, you're the expert on your machines. How do you inform Carol and you know the Carols of the world that you are indeed the experts, and what are the new services that you offer, or that you're at least engaging to offer in the future, whether it's near, mid, or long term?
Yeah, I think this is a role change as well, because in the past we were delivering more or less a machine, and then we had a reactive service. This means Carol called us, there is an issue on the machine, and then more or less we discussed on doing improvement. Now we are more or less in a way that we can do something on the data-driven decisions and support much earlier a customer. And this is only possible if we act as partners in a project. I think that's the most important thing at all, because Carol, for instance, knows the process and how they use the machine. We know how the machine works in detail. And then as partners, we can find better solution or do decisions based on data and of experience on the user side, and of course, of the machine builder side.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to other equipment manufacturers looking to differentiate themselves? What was your first step, or what was the biggest mistake that you learned from, if you made any mistakes?
It's maybe not really a mistake, but more or less you need to be in an ongoing process and learn how to work together and establish really assets or more or less additional sets of data of the machines. And you have to convince the customer that he gets really benefit from working together with a machine supplier and act as partners for a long service time of the machine.
Yeah. And how do you manage because Carol mentioned it as well, but how do you manage the data compliance and security when we're in an increasingly digital world with, digital service models?
Mm. Yeah, the issue is to find really a proven system which includes safety, security, and more or less really a restrictive, safe handling of data. And this is maybe one reasons why we were using the PI system, because there are some mechanisms which are already in place on Carol's side and on our end as machine supplier. And then it's maybe easier to find, let me say, a linkage between us two.
Yeah.
Andreas, this is Thilo. Can I just have a quick question? I mean, certainly you are the expert for your own machine, but to what degree you leverage external intelligence, other third parties for advanced analytics, driving predictions? Are you working, with any sort of artificial intelligence already, machine learning? Are there any plans?
Yeah, it's maybe depending on our industry, because in the pharmaceutical industry, all the machine parameters are usually validated. And so it's not that easy to do automatic adaptations or learnings of a machine. But of course, if you monitor a process for a longer time, and it's possible to check possible deviations and find these deviations based on data, this improves more or less the quality and the performance of the machine very much.
Mm-hmm.
So how important is a seamless integration from edge to cloud, and why?
From our end, I think it's really important, because even on our machines, we have different control systems and different devices that we include in one machine, which gives more or less the full range of functionality that's required. And therefore, it's quite important to have a seamless integration, because otherwise you need to run in a big topic with generating specific interfaces to specific devices and whatever.
Yeah. And how do you manage this increasingly complex IT infrastructure? Responsible for gathering so much data from different customers and different kind of data points. Do you have an increasingly large or omnipresent IT department, or do you have different IT departments for different business units? How do you do it?
In general, we have one IT department which is responsible for the whole IT infrastructure on our side. And in addition, we have one specific team who is taking care, for instance, for the servers where we store or where we could store possible customer data. And this is really separated to keep more or less the data secure and safe.
Yeah. And when it comes to, because now we're talking about enabling, new digital business models, do you have a CDO? Do you have a kind of a dedicated digital business unit, or is it more embedded into the different business lines to have more digital agents that work kind of scattered all over the organization, or is it more centralized? How is that functioning?
No, we have several departments who need to join the digital team, and they need to work together. Of course, we have our engineering department, we have a service department, we have our R&D department. And mainly one of the first steps at Bausch + Ströbel was the digital lab where I sit in, where we concentrate development. And our CTO is really taking care personally for the digitalization at Bausch + Ströbel, and that's a big goal for us.
Okay. Well, I think Andreas, you had some extra slides you wanted to show
Yes.
and talk over. Maybe I can do that for you now.
Yeah, and this is now one slide which shows the idea of Carol as well, because we have now delivered a machine, and this machine has some data points, and then it's really important to do an aggregation of the data and do, let me say, structurization of the data. And our new model says we generate already assets with a machine, because we know which works together or which functions together in one machine. We generate one asset, which you see on the top. And on the left, we generate really displays with a device monitoring. So you can do a device monitoring from the first day the machine is delivered, and you get really quick and immediately feedback of the machine directly with screens and assets that were defined by us and which could be included on customer systems and of course on our end as well. And this offers one really important point, in my opinion, in sharing data as well, and this is transparency, because the customer sees what kind of data we do and what kind of data we saw and evaluate, and it's really transparent. And I think this is one of the most important things if you do a partnership with a customer like Carol, for instance.
Yeah.
And Carol, this seems to be an example from Bausch + Ströbel that is delivered to you, basically. Did you give them the guidance on what you want to see and say, hey, I need exactly this type of dashboards or this format should report into my systems? How did you constrain that?
This is exactly the opposite, because I say, guys, you have the better overview of that machine.
Yeah.
And know how it's constructed. That was my first initiative to them say, share this knowledge with us. I don't want to sit down and understand the complexity of the machine. I just want to consume that data.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They say, yes, we understand the assets. They contextualize the asset as you just saying, and they just deliver directly the data into the format that they believe it makes sense. Of course, there are several iterations. That's what we discussed, how to change it and so on. But the basic is coming directly from that.
So you liberate yourself from the requirement to understand the system, the machine that you buy, and just give them like operational parameters that they should fit into.
Yes, well, I mean, there are always user requirements. When you buy a machine, you have some performance parameters that the machine needs to deliver and so on. But the data-driven use cases say, for me, it takes time to understand what could be the potential triggers of the machine to improve efficiency. And they tell me, look, if you look at this temperature and this vibration, that you know that the asset is going to fail soon.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Very good. Thanks.
And even, let me say, systems like this, they allow us to offer better service to customers, because with data-driven, let me say, decisions, we know how the machine was reacting in the last days. And then we know in detail more or less where the possible issue of the machine could be in fault finding. So we are much quicker. And for instance, we can give an easier support per remote, or even if we need to go inside, we are really prepared and we know what to do. And this is really the biggest effort of sharing data and more taking data-driven decisions.
Yeah, one could say, Carol and Andreas, that this is really about trust, right? Because Carol, when you're buying physical equipment, I guess it's not very easy, but much easier to change from one machine to the other. But as soon as you kind of commit to this sharing of data and relying on your vendor's expertise to tell you what to do when it comes to data-driven decision, then you really it really means you have trust between both parties, or that is really a key ingredient.
Well, yes, the trust is certainly the key. Here we need to see it that we have always an option. Bausch + Ströbel can also deliver those assets as you see them and those dashboards directly with the machine for the machine. It is more static, okay? So you don't get always the newest updates and so on. But if you use then, for example, cloud services or directly the data the shared data with Bauernstübel, you can get much more value. So yes, you can step back and say, I don't trust that much. I still use those certain aspects of this, what Bauernstübel delivers.
Yeah, well, Andreas, thanks for your story. And I know you have one more slide. Maybe we can go back to it a bit later, because what I want to do is actually loop Eivind in, who's very nicely waiting. But Eivind, so you, like Andreas, you're also on a journey to develop kind of data-driven services as well. So tell us, why is it important for you? Is it coming from your customer base, or is it coming from you because you see the rest of the industry and the rest of the ecosystem going in that direction? Where is the push?
It's a little bit about both, actually. So definitely we see that the industry is going toward more data-driven services, and we also see internally that this is how we internally can also improve on and also get business opportunities. Especially when it comes to looking at both our suppliers and our customers. They're all going in that direction, and even for our industry that's kind of conservative, it's definitely a goal here to get data-driven services to the next level, and also go from it's kind of similar to what the whole other industries is also looking into. So I'm quite. It's good to hear from totally another industry what I working is that they have the same goals and the same opportunities and challenges as well. So I think here it doesn't matter what kind of industry you're in. You will definitely learn from each other and go towards a common goal with data-driven services, going to actually optimize and also reduce cost on your machines, and how you do your decision making real time. So we look into most of our quite important challenges or things is that partnership is one thing, very important. Incentive-based contracts and so forth. It's some of the important things that we have looked into.
And do you feel that your roadmap towards becoming a data-driven service provider, has it changed anything from what you had planned pre-pandemic to where you are today, based on how your customers have reacted and what your capabilities and resources were in itself?
Yeah, actually, probably the biggest change lately has been, as also Andreas and Carol spoke about, it was the remote capabilities. So we see a definite change in the way customer, and also we are looking into that and trying to evolve into getting the expert on onshore, because we're an offshore industry, helping the offshore crew when they see issues, all the way from event handling all to a more data-driven service when it comes to condition-based maintenance or performance. So it's been a huge focus going forward, and we see that also tools when it comes to that are also evolving in a rapid speed.
Yeah.
Eivind, this is Thilo. It was mentioned earlier by Carol that he envisioned something like equipment as a service, right? And there was a very prominent example given in Pi World Gothenburg last year, when we still had physical events. Do you all remember the good old times? I'm not sure of the name of the company, but there was a keynote speaker on stage, and he said he's working for a drilling company or equipment manufacturer that does drilling equipment, and he said they're actually not selling the machine itself or the drills, but the holes. So how many holes per minute, per week that they can provide. I mean, you serve a different industry. Maybe you can allude to that. So how far away you are from, you know, really providing equipment as a service?
Yeah, it's something that we're looking into, especially when it comes to our customers. That's the way they are evolving. It's difficult for one is because you have some legacy. So on existing equipment, it might be difficult to get to that stage. But when you look at next developing of equipment, it might be that we can go forward on that one. But it's definitely challenging because it's a huge cost, and we can see ourselves as a bank then to go for that kind of service. So it's definitely coming, but we're not there yet.
It's more gradually, right? So it seems, I mean, I was just in Pi World here in Berlin last week, and it seems that the equipment manufacturer, they use this as a differentiating factor. So they still basically sell the equipment, so the capital investment from the customer is still there, but they say, you know, we add additional services on top based on the data that we collect. And I think that also drives the discussion a little bit in the direction of edge, Thomas, because Ivan also mentioned about legacy equipment and that you need to have some sort of consistent strategy, right? Of course, if I can wish for something, I want Carol to go and buy every 3 years new equipment, right? But you know, who's going to pay for that? So, and I think that's why a consistent strategy that really allows to grow also and incorporate the legacy assets that we would probably consider being on the edge. Either they are really far remote or they are not fully connected yet. You know, that should be an integrated part of the strategy going forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And it's more to that is that the whole industry needs to go in the same direction. And that's where we see challenges that just some of the industry are interested in to go into that performance-based drilling or setup, but not everybody sees the benefit of that because it's a lot of challenges to do that.
Ivan, to what degree you also consider operating the equipment that you manufacture for your customers? Is that something that you already do? Is that for consideration, gradually growing, or not
consideration for now anyway. I see that we more or less are into the CBM or condition-based maintenance, where we actually can do some of the maintenance, not the daily maintenance, but maybe the monthly maintenance, and try to go for that. But it's also something that we need strong partnerships to do, and I think that's a key word here: partnerships, going into such a dramatic change in business setups.
Well, this leads me actually to another poll. When we talk about partnerships, we talked, about trust, and we also talked a lot about data. But maybe not every customer is as willing as Carol to share data also with their equipment manufacturer. So quick survey right now. So would you share machine data with machine suppliers? If we could have the audience just take a few seconds to answer that, because of course, if you don't capture the data and you can't, use it, there is not much you can do. So in a sense, it goes back to maybe the approach or the communication with the customers as well, explaining the value also back to them in terms of them sharing the data. But of course, it's always linked to, like we discussed, legacy equipment. How do you connect them? How can you, secure the legacy equipment or even new equipment? Of course, you have regulations as well, different regulations in different regions of the world. So
Thomas, I have another question that's basically for both Andreas and Ivan.
Yeah.
Just to put things into perspective also for the audience that we have. Can you describe a little bit what kind of effort you had to undergo internally in order to establish these like digital models. And without mentioning names, I met manufacturers that think if they glue an IP-based temperature sensor on the equipment and write in the data sheet, oh, that speaks IP and you can connect to AWS Cloud or Microsoft Cloud, and then they kiss it goodbye and say, this is my Industry 4.0 strategy. They certainly missed the point, right? So can you give the audience a feel for how much effort is really, building the competence internally, going through the procedures and so on?
Yeah, so for our from our side, it's the picture that Carol showed earlier with the pyramid, the two first section in the pyramid. That's where we so 80%. That's our 100%. Pretty much is to that kind of start building it kind of from the start. And when it comes to a good structure, data quality, the security around it, data ownership, it's the whole structure that that everything starts with, and then you can start on the user models and the business models. But it's has been a big learning, and we started off on our side to just get everything. Let's get everything and start analyzing that big data. But it didn't work quite that easy. So for our point of view was to build that structure first and foremost when it comes to data quality, especially, and also structuring your assets. It's very important. So that's where we started anyway, and saw that the biggest work is and will be going forward when it comes to legacy. How far back can you go, and are you willing to go on your older assets?
Okay.
And this is maybe an important point for us as well, and this is what Carol mentioned with GXP and non-GXP data. In the past, our pharmaceutical machines, we were just collecting the GXP data.
I'm sure people will not know what GXP is.
Maybe Carol can give a short explanation what's GMP and non-GMP.
GXP was a GMP, good manufacturing practices. GMP data are all quality relevant data that we need to collect, but also maintain to prove product quality. We're in healthcare, we're producing drugs, and you need to keep this quality data, and you need to maintain them for entire life cycle. Here we talk about 11 years of for production activities, 30 years R&D activities, but it's always related with the product quality data, which have certain, as Andreas mentioned here, importance, and the non-GMP data, I would say we don't have the obligations to maintain them for 30 years. You can get rid of those data after a week or 2 weeks, so you can collect many more data for a shorter period of time, for example.
Yeah. And this is the important point for us in structuring a machine and trading assets, because in the past we were just concentrating on this GMP data, because they were important for the customers to release and prove a perfect production. And now we need to add an additional set of data, which are the non-GXP data. And this could be done with additional sensors, or that we even collect existing controller data, which are now in the control system and not used at all. And this is the step we have to go as well, because if we build an asset, we have to use both kinds of data, and then we can do a real decision on machine data. And this is the new topic where we can support customers in the selection of what's really GMP and what's non-GMP data, because this is really important for Carol. Even if we now say storage of data costs nothing at all, but if you need to store thousands of data points for 11 years, this is a huge amount of data. And if it's just used for maintenance or whatever, it's no need to do this. And this is a really important thing which you need to do together with a customer as partner to do this selection really in a really early stage of the project.
What Andreas mentioned is very important here. There was another aspect equally important, say, if you want to provide new services to existing machines, adding new sensors, as long as they are not GXP and they are not touching the original equipment functionality, you don't have to qualify. So that's why it's very important for us to say distinguish this quality relevant data and non-quality, because we could add new functionalities to the existing equipment as long as the production is not impacted. So you draw more conclusions out of the data because you see vibration whatsoever, but it's not touching the original equipment. This is very important.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think we don't have a lot of time left, and I do want to get over to Thilo as well. Thilo, I know you have also some slides you want to share. So
yeah, maybe just a bit of a summary, right? So what we heard so far, it's something that we in OSI Soft really specialize in. And we made a lot of effort really to work to provide a full connectivity. And this is just a bit of a representation here. You guys know us from the last 40 years working on plant level with operational data, right? So we're really absolutely the experts for that subject. But you can see as the discussion unfolds, and I think the GMP, non-GMP data is something that is a nice representation of what we want to achieve, right? We have stuff that we are forced legally compliant side to do something, but now as we try to optimize, for example, in the electrical environment, carbon footprint or factory efficiency, we need much more data points that we aggregate that goes over and above that normal, quality overview that we do on production level. So therefore, we really made a lot of effort to support a seamless infrastructure that brings the edge components in. So that gives you an opportunity also to connect legacy equipment. And there were questions even from the audience regarding this, right? So what can we do if we have old assets? How we can ensure data integrity? And we have a solution developed for that called Edge Data Store. So basically a Pi-based edge device that can collect data from the periphery of the network and bring this into your data infrastructure system. At the same time, we connect up into the cloud to connect multiple enterprises with each other, but also establish a cloud-based connectivity between consumer and supplier. So Andreas and Carol, right? So there is a platform established now also to be leveraged in the cloud, not necessarily, but as an option available. So that therefore we can drive much broader scope and scale for data-driven decision. And this is really something that we see that resonates well. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not enough for an equipment manufacturer today just to glue an IP-based sensor next to the machine and deliver a value. You need to tie into the existing data infrastructure of your customer, because very little companies in the production start from scratch, having nothing and can build everything new. Normally you have to align with what exists. And then at the same time, you want to leverage new technology, elasticity and capacity in the cloud. And even we are the industry representative of that. And we know that we are probably from the maturity 10 years behind or even 15 years behind the IT companies. This is something that we cannot deny, right? And if you go to the next slide, Thomas, and then my sales pitch is over. We really worked hard to expand the Pi core system that people know that connects asset plants and the enterprise into the edge to either provide an offering for equipment manufacturer to make their assets that sit remote intelligence and bring it into the Pi system. But on the other hand, we also connect up with the cloud services in order to leverage the capacity that exists in the cloud and allow for seamless integration with third-party algorithms. And of course, the data integrity, security needs to be considered doing so. But our message is really here to invite customers and also equipment manufacturers, but also service companies to look into this and see how they can grow now an end-to-end digital service model. Because we also allow in our license contracts for the various plays in order to support these business models going forward. And this is basically what I wanted to share with you. Back to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Thilo. And we're actually pretty much nearing the end of the discussion. So what I would like to do is open the floor for questions from the audience. And before I do that, I would like to run one last poll because we've been discussing it. So just to get a feeling from the audience if they're considering cloud technologies in their strategy to handle industrial operational data. So we'll just leave a few seconds. And again, we will share the results of the polls we're running post-webinar, so you'll be able to see an overview of the audience. Okay, so we had a few questions actually, and I know we touched upon it, but really focusing on data integrity. So I don't know if anyone is willing to explore it a bit more or dig a bit deeper, because it seems to be quite a big concern or maybe challenging area to tackle for everyone.
Yeah, maybe I can,
maybe
before I hand it over to
Go.
Carol, I can just talk from the experience from the last conference. So I saw a couple of equipment manufacturers that made exactly the correct considerations, right? Saying, okay, we cannot just provide the machine, we also need to provide a data-driven services model on top. Could be preemptive maintenance or predictive quality, whatever it is. However, then we ask the questions, how do you align your data strategy with your end customer? How do you ensure that the format is correct, that the data is not corrupted, that the security is applied accordingly? So maybe that's for Carol to answer, because he's the end user that needs to tie it all together. How you manage this?
There are two aspects of that. I'm not concerned about PI delivering data integrity compliance, because PI handles the data in a correct manner. We have the quality attributes and encryption, whatever you need. But PI is in this format just collecting the data. So if the equipment is not data integrity compliant, PI will not get data compliant. It doesn't work like that. So we need to first assure that the equipment is data integrity compliant. It's very important. And as the data integrity understanding is also changing within the industry, it's evolving. We cannot say that equipment which is 15 years old, it's compliant with current data integrity strategies, right? So, and the data integrity strategies are evolving from day to day. This means is that unless we put some life cycle on the software, we will not be compliant with the old equipment. So after 25 years or 30 years, we will never be compliant with that equipment unless you do some workarounds, some manual procedures, whatsoever. So it's always go up to enabling life cycle on the production equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question then regarding data integrity, very quick, and then we can move on because we have 2-3 more questions. But I mean, we live in a very global world. A lot of companies have, maybe headquarters in one country, but with global operations. And of course, you have a lot of different legislations on, data security or, these regulations. For example, in the EU might differ than the US, which might differ in different Asian countries and in Africa. So how, if you have any knowledge on that aspect to Carol, Ivan, or Andreas, how do you manage that? Do you kind of choose the strictest regulation and decide to go for that everywhere? Or do you have different strategies based on different legal requirements for different location where you operate? And maybe Ivan, because you do a lot of offshore, it might be even more complicated. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of strict out there. So we need to anyway adhere to the strictest rules sets when it comes to data quality. You have your ISO standards, which is quite open, but we need to be more strategic to that towards that. But also the cybersecurity is more and more a focus point for our customers that we need to adhere to, and we see it especially the last year, and also in the pandemic has been a lot of focus towards that. But I think that's also something that we need to address on the business setup as well, because it's a lot of business opportunities around those services as well to be ongoing forward on both cybersecurity and data quality, which is very important for us. And we definitely adhere to the strongest regulations. We see that we not all our customers are adhering to them, but we need to have the strictest setup.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another two more questions, because I know we're running a bit over. One very quick. So when we talk about digital, it can often be a new topic or not fully understood for everyone. So what kind of education do you recommend your peers to get up to speed on this? Do you have any specific books or authors or white papers or anything that you like to refer to even internally for your own training with your own colleagues and so forth?
So I can invite everybody to join the OSI Soft University. So there's classes on that, but they are often very product specific. I understand that, and you might not want to get brainwashed by a vendor. So, but the OSI University exists.
Andreas, Eivind, Carol, any recommendation of internal usage that you pass around for yourself to get new colleagues up to speed on anything digital?
What I can say from my side is that you cannot just read a paper and say, now I understood this. It is a cultural change. And this takes years. It's not something that you read a book and then you change your organization. I see within our organization, it takes a couple of iterations. It's improving, and it is really every single person need to change his way of operation. We see it's digitalization is putting into every corner of the organization. It's not just the machines, but it's manufacturing systems, data, MES, LIMS everywhere. And that's where the organization need to change. And then every organization is different and need to find a way. But it's certainly a bigger change that will take some years.
Yeah, I think that's a point from us as well, because we had several discussions in the past with customers, specifically with Carol as well. And there we had some really detailed discussions on what we think was really digital and digital ready and how we see different topics. Because on our end, we have at the first just the machine builder view on digitalization, and Carol has the end user view. And now you need to find something like conclusion that you get a full picture of digitalization for one product. And this is an important thing to act as a partner, because you need to understand the other side on the table.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And also what Carol says, this is a cultural aspect of it. And also that from my point of view, it was very educational to learn from other industries, because different industries are on different levels when it comes to these questions, and yeah, you just need to go over it a few times, as Carol said, more iterations, and understanding the whole aspect of it, because it's big when you start digging into it, all the way from data quality to cybersecurity and handling of data and data ownership. It's cybersecurity is all the way from locking your door to the firewalls and system setups that's involved in that. So yeah, it's complicated, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, final question, and it's a bit more aimed towards Andreas and Eivind, and maybe Tilo can jump in from his overall experience. But Andreas and Eivind, do you have any real use case of a profitable digital business model that maybe you've already been able to implement, maybe as a test case or starter project? that you can share, which would fit kind of in the traditional manufacturer industry?
For our, we have one I can mention, and that's our performance-based digital services, where we actually monitor the performance of the whole of all our equipment and how we can improve on there when it comes to because we have a lot of equipment handing off things to each other in a way, and then to try to optimize that process, and that's also a very important aspect of digitization, is looking at the process. How can you optimize the process with including digital tools or setups? So that's something that we have been quite successful regarding performance.
And Thomas, maybe you can show the last slide of that.
Yes, let me.
This is
this one, yeah.
Yep, and this is a screenshot of a module that we offer, and this is a maintenance manager, and this is a system which is based on a very, very limited amount of data points, and we can support customers for doing the service or inspections on our machines. This was one of our starting points as a simple use case which we have developed in the past. I think this is one of our first ones that we have done. And then, of course, the next step would be the performance monitoring and performance increasing of the machine.
Yeah. And guys, I mean, there's a lot of use cases documented for connected services. This is the business model associated to that approach for the digital services for equipment manufacturer, but also for services companies. You find on our website, there's a lot of public references from Pi Worlds. So you have big names like Shell, Siemens, Caterpillar, Autotech, so there's a lot of reference examples already gathered and use cases available. And we can share that out in the follow-up email as a link if you are particularly interested. But, we are a relatively small audience. We are all available, to share that afterwards in a one-to-one conversation. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, on that note, I would like to thank everyone who's attended us today. And Andreas, Ivan, Thilo, and Carol, thank you for your time today and your contribution. If you would like to continue the conversation regarding connected services, you can contact Thilo's colleague, TJ Bush, if you have his
Bush, yeah.
And you will get the email contact in the follow-up email with the link to the webinar recording as well. So on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much again for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you all at a future Copperberg event, hopefully physical very soon.
Thanks for having us. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.